Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be reviewing chapter 1124. I'll be covering the chapter breakdown, pacing, and the overall chapter rating that I have for it. Starting out, we are back on the ship of Big News Morgan's. We see him proclaiming that he is going to be basically spreading misinformation. He's going to shift the public in a direction that he feels is necessary, which typically is going to be some BS. As he proclaims this, we see Vivi. She is, of course, righteous and she's going to speak up, but he then feels slighted and decides to mention that, hey, you know, pretty much you crossed me, I'll out you and let them know where you are at, because we know that currently she's still being targeted by Emu. We know that CP0 back at the Reverie was going to apprehend her, but she was able to escape. In his pursuit of shifting the public's view, seems like he's going to accurately cover Blackbeard versus Law, Shanks versus Kid, but he's going to also frame Luffy for killing Vegapunk. I have no idea what his angle is against Luffy, but I can only imagine that this is not going to end well for him. As we see, Sentomaru has escaped Egghead Island, at least what we feel he actually will end up. He's on a rowboat and he's rowing currently, but it's pretty bittersweet because Vegapunk, who he looked up to, and Kizaru, who he looked up to, is no longer in his life. We obviously know that Stella Vegapunk was killed by Kizaru, or killed off completely by Kizaru, and we also know that Kizaru has made his decision to align with the world government against his friends. Although I do recognize that Kizaru does sort of kind of look at them as a friend, that friendship never outweighed his duty as a Marine. And for some people that's admirable, but to me, and especially with the theme of One Piece being that friends is pretty much everything, and you know, the main character Luffy doesn't even feel like himself without his friends. It just kind of just doesn't sit right with me, and personally I think that Kizaru is going to get what he deserves. We move on to Sakazuki calling to check in and make sure that everyone is all right. A status update of the situation, which Borsalino is the only one that was able to withstand Joy Boy's hockey long enough to stay conscious, and he responds with, "Shut up."
Isaac, shut the hell up! Damn!
To a lot of us fans, that was pretty much like, wow, you know, seeing them two kind of at odds right off the bat, you know, kind of wonder why, but we slowly but surely find out that basically it's because of the pain that he felt for killing a friend. Now, again, as I just said, that's kind of like a wishy-washy thing, because in my opinion, if this is your friend, there's nothing that would make you kill them per se, but he chose to do what he did, and now he got to lay in that bed. We see that Sakazuki insinuate that Borsalino was being sloppy, and obviously, as I predicted and was pretty much stating the entire time, Borsalino obviously didn't feel that way. As we clearly seen by Oda, Borsalino was trying to kill Vegapunk. Now, I know some people is going to be like, oh, it wasn't his absolute best, blah, blah, blah. The man was trying. And a lot of people try to argue confliction and things like that, which he was conflicted, but it did not prohibit him from executing his mission. He was relentless. He did not stop. There are several instances where he could have stopped. There were several instances where he could have allowed himself to quit. Think about it like this. Luffy sent him flying. Kizaru shifted him, instead of falling into the water, which I guess makes sense because obviously he don't want to die, but instead of falling into the water, he decides to shift himself and go back up, and then he created several clones of himself, and then he was able to sneak back onto Egghead Island to continue his assault on Vegapunk. But we see later on when Luffy launches him into the ship, he stays put. That's only because his mission was complete. His mission was to kill Vegapunk, and he was able to complete that, even though he isn't the only reason why Vegapunk is dead. We also know that Saturn also played a part in Vegapunk's death as well, but at the end of the day, the final blow came from Kizaru, which we see him crying. Again, I do not feel bad for him. I don't have any sympathy for him. We get a little bit of quick montage of him thinking back on when he first met Vegapunk and how he pretty much helped Vegapunk build Egghead and stuff. But, you know, so how can you destroy it? It just was a little bit odd for me, but it wasn't a bit too shocking because we know that they joined the Marines together. But Sakazuki basically apologized and called him a brother, which, you know, at the time, Borsellino, right now, he just ain't feeling it. It is an interesting dynamic, you know, because he did ask Sakazuki, like, hey, have you ever killed a friend before? Which obviously we know that Sakazuki chose not to kill Kuzan. He spared his life. For the time being, Sakazuki is trying somewhere, somehow in that magma body of his to show some compassion and understanding for someone who has having to make a tough call, which I guess is more character development, I guess, for Sakazuki. But we'll see how much more we'll get from him as the story progresses. I'm pretty sure we're going to get a flashback, and we'll cross that bridge whenever we get there. The next half of the chapter is going to be centered around the Straw Hats. As the Thousand Sunny is sailing next to the Great Eirik, we stumble upon a conversation of Jinbei and Frankie. Basically, they're discussing about Luffy and currently how down he is, how hard he is taking the fact that he was unable to rescue Vegapunk. As Frankie lists off, you know, the slew of enemies that they had to face off against, you know, the 5 elders, Borsellino, a large contingency of the Navy, and you had the Seraphim plus CP0 on top of that. They're looking at it as like a miracle that they survived. In my personal opinion, I feel like to a degree, I could see what he's saying just by the way that Oda crafted the whole entire story of Egghead. But I do feel like they were more than capable to face off against their opponents. I do not believe that we got the best of the Straw Hats in this arc, and I don't think that that was the goal per se of this arc. This wasn't the arc where Oda was pulling on all stops for the Straw Hats. That was Wano. So this arc was kind of just to show that they are capable and they are able to defend themselves and work together as a team to face off against various enemies, and also, you know, utilizing Luffy's strong ability of bringing in people whenever it's a dire situation, i.e. the giant warrior pirates. Zoro is basically stating that he views Luffy as pathetic due to constant moping around Vegapunk's death, which I do feel like that was an interesting take given how Zoro should know how Luffy is. Luffy isn't someone that is just heartless and unable to have sympathy and empathy for someone else. The fact that Zoro seems to not be able to register why his captain is feeling the way that he is feeling and or still feeling the way he is feeling, it kind of like leans into a lot of people's criticism of Zoro post-time skip, where he seems just to be more edgy and more heartless and more, it comes off as a little bit weird. And I'm a fan of Zoro, but it just comes off as a little bit weird that this is your captain that you know and love, yet you can't understand or have enough understanding within you to at least accept why Luffy is responding the way that he is responding. Yes, Luffy is the emperor. What does that mean? He's still Luffy. It's just a title. You know, Luffy is still himself. Yes, he's gotten stronger. Yes, he's gained this new title, but he is still him. And you know that, yet you're acting weird about it. So that was a little bit strange for me. But moving on to the giant warrior pirate ship, we see Usopp, Nami, Chopper, and Sanji are surrounding Lilith as she begins to wake up from her knockout that Atlas gave her. You know, that Atlas decided to sacrifice herself to save Lilith, so that way a Vegapunk was able to survive. Lilith gets up and they fill her in on the news that basically the Straw Hats were unable to save any further Vegapunks outside of her, which she says something along the lines of, I just heard all of it. And I'm assuming that it's referring back to Punk Records, the fact that they are able to sync to Punk Records. They kind of let her fill her in on how Luffy's feeling. So Luffy's very down about the fact that Vegapunk did not survive, that Vegapunk's dead. Which she then decides to go and comfort Luffy and fill everyone in that based on our concept of death, which is pretty much a standard concept of death, where once the body is dead and no longer is here and present with us, you're considered dead. Based on that concept, yes, Vegapunk is dead. But based on their concept, i.e. Punk Records, and the fact that they all synced to the Stella's brain, and it's pretty much like, you know, their own library, Vegapunk is still very much alive thanks to Lilith, which I kind of feel like is a little bit poetic in a way. The fact that the first Vegapunk that we run into on screen is Lilith, which, you know, obviously we know that she announced herself as the Vegapunk, and then we ended with Lilith because we know that York is still alive, but she will be a puppet and a slave to the world government, and I'm assuming she's going to eventually get killed. So our Vegapunk is still alive. Lilith is still able to sync to the Punk records. So the whole concept of Vegapunk all coming together is still very much present. Therefore, that was the loophole for Luffy and them to basically state that they did not kill Vegapunk, which in my opinion, going back to Kizaru, I don't believe that Oda will have him come to that revelation. And since he would not come to that revelation, I think that this is going to be something that lingers on for the remaining of the story of how he was basically relentless on killing his friend. We see Luffy is back up in spirits and he's ready to party, because although we did see at the end of the chapter that they had started partying, we seen that Luffy was stating something about later. And that was just because of how he was feeling about Vegapunk. Now he's able to full on party and we get everybody come out. But an interesting thing that I noticed about it was Luffy proclaimed pretty much to the giants, you know, saying to their face, like, it doesn't matter if you become my enemy or not, which shows that Luffy's well aware that they're not 100% loyal to him. He's basically stating that, like, yeah, it doesn't matter who becomes my enemy, I'm going to become the King of Pirates, which we all love. This is going to set the stage for how Luffy moves forward, I believe. Wrapping up the end of the chapter, we know that they're heading northeast to Elbaf. If y'all can remember, back in Wano, when Law, Luffy, and Kid were discussing the path they were going, we know that Law went northeast to Winter Island. We know that Kid went east to Elbaf, and we know that Luffy went southeast to Egghead. We know that based on the map that we got, northeast is the way from Egghead to Elbaf. So this aligns with where we're at. Basically, that would be like southwest. So basically, if I'm traveling from Elbaf to Egghead, I got to go southwest to get there. We also see that there's someone on the coast of Elbaf waiting for them, stating, come on. To me, and I talked to some other people and they weren't feeling like it was 100% aggressive in that manner, more so like a sign of respect. But to me, I took it as 100% aggressive. This is a declaration, in my opinion, of a challenge. Basically, like bring it on. So I'm assuming that it's going to be a giant just based on how the silhouette is, and I believe they're kind of sitting next to a tree. In my opinion, if it was a human, the tree would look way bigger. It kind of seemed like it's proportionate like we would be to a tree. So I'm assuming that this is a giant. It could be a new warrior from Elbaf, upcoming one, because although we know that Dorian Broggy and how mighty they were going for 100 years. I could see within that time frame there would be a new giant that came along and became kind of like the newer modern version of Dorian Broggy, where they're mighty and they're strong and they're powerful. So I'd like to see where this goes. I'll try to discuss a video soon on my thoughts on Elbaf and just my predictions. But overall, the pacing, in my opinion, was pretty solid. We did go from being on a Big News Morgan ship to being back at Egghead to then meeting up with the crew on 1,000 Sunny and the Giant Warrior Pirates on their ship. And then we get to a little snippet of Elbaf. I feel like the pacing for the most part was not bad. We weren't too all over the place, but overall, I think I'll give the chapter a 9 out of 10. I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10 just because although we got a good revelation of wrapping up the death situation and if the Straw Hats failed or not, which I know that a lot of the community seemed like they were happy that the Straw Hats had failed. We didn't get that. The Straw Hats actually succeeded and the Marines failed, which I predicted from the beginning. I will say that Egghead overall, to me, again, is top 2. I have Wano above it. I think it sits perfectly as number 2. It's also a 67 chapter long arc, which would place it as number 4 on the list behind Wano, Dressrosa, and Whole Cake Island. So for the length of the arc, we did get a solid arc. I'm looking forward to Elbaf and seeing where we go from there. But what are your thoughts on the chapter? How did you feel about it? Do you have sympathy for Kizaru? I personally do not, But let me all know that in the comment section below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you.